Well, that's a great question. I'm glad that somebody raised that. There has to be people to rule over. So I would immediately, for your notes, refer you to Isaiah 65, which speaks of people who are going to die at 100 years old. And if they die at 100 years old, they're considered just kids. That implies huge longevity from some people who are being ruled over, but they are not immortal. You can't die if you're immortal. So clearly, the questioner is right there. You cannot be ruling over other immortals. I don't think that's the point. So in this period of time described as post-millennial, after the millennium, you still have, apparently, human beings who are still mortal. Now, that might be difficult. But my good friend F.F. Bruce, who was very kind to me many years ago, took an interest in what we're doing, pointed out that we've already seen immortals and mortals together. How was that? When Jesus came back from death at his resurrection, he had a body recognizable as Jesus. He said, I'm not a ghost. I'm not a spook. I'm a real human person, but I'm immortalized. Let's have a meal together. So you've already had a model of an immortal human being, the only one at that point. Jesus himself, after his resurrection, was conversing and eating and drinking with mortal human beings. So that's already happened. That's not impossible. So if that's the way it turns out, if even in this period of time after the millennium, so be it. And other things in this passage, a little bit further on, I'll refer to it. There were leaves of the trees for the healing of the nations. You'll find that in chapter 22, verse 2. There are trees in this glorious scene that we're describing here, which involve the healing leaves for the nations. That could well imply that there is still a healing process going on there. Carlos has it in front of us here. The angel showed me a river of the water of life as clear as crystal, down the middle of the main street of the city. On either side of the river stood a tree of life. That takes us back to Genesis, of course, the original tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit and yielding fresh crop every month. That's pretty unusual for a fruit tree, isn't it? So we're not talking your average fruit trees there. And the leaves of the trees were for the healing of the nations. So the easy answer to your question is that there are people who at the second coming survive into that 1,000-year period as mortals. Otherwise, the text of Scripture would be untrue in Isaiah 65. You cannot be ruling over other immortals. No, you're going to be judging and ruling, if necessary, with discipline, as Revelation 2:26 had promised the church. You're going to be ruling with the rod of iron, and if necessary, very severe discipline. Jesus himself said in the famous parable in Luke 19, my enemies are going to have to submit to me. This is not the non-violent Jesus, who currently certainly advocates non-violence for us, but at that time he's going to say, bring my enemies in front of me, this is in Luke 19:27, and slaughter them in my presence. Have you got your mind around that, or is that a verse you don't read very much? You need to get the balance. There is a time for justice. Vengeance, God says, is mine. And he's going to see that all the rebellious nonsense that we now witness in the world will come to an end.
This was, of course, foreseen by the Old Testament prophets. You have Isaiah 66:19. I will set a sign among them. I will send some of those who survive to the nations in distant lands that have not heard of my fame or seen my glory. They will proclaim my glory among the nations.
Wonderful.
This is during that Messianic age.
Yes.
It says 69:19, Zechariah 14:16.
Yep.
Survivors from all the nations that have attacked Israel will go year after year to worship the King, the Pantocrator there, Yahweh, and there will be nations, survivors from the nations. So this is easy to search out, by the way. This is Bible Hub.
Right.
So just type in survivors, nations, and you'll see all kinds of good material.
Yes.